Kra. Swati Kra.
I'm not going to even try it.
The last time I'm going to attempt that pronunciation.
Yeah, out of respect for the language, I am not going to even try.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Need Some Introduction. On this podcast, if you are new to the podcast, we are watching something, discussing it here on the pod, bringing you some camaraderie and some context, hopefully. And usually week to week, sometimes binges, sometimes movies, but usually watching something that's in the culture week to week. And of course, the most popular, definitely for the past couple of weeks, the cultural conversation has been around The White Lotus, which HBO just announced their ratings growth on this. I think they are averaging 18 million views per episode. And after the last season, the increase in viewership increased about 50% once the full season was available. So this is going to be well over 20 million. And I'm sure it'll get Emmy nominations and people will be binging it over the course of the year. All that is to say that this is one of HBO's hugest successes, obviously, getting much better ratings, for example, than House of the Dragon, and I'm sure it costs much less. Although I'm sure his budgets, Mike White, that is, his budgets will continue to climb from...
But, there was a little clip on it that I saw over the weekend that said all the actors get paid the same, and everyone gets, I think it was $40,000 an episode.
Wow. So, that's kind of surprising. I guess it's great for your career, considering that I think in the last season, season 2, the entire, and maybe this happened with season 1 as well, the vast majority of the cast was nominated. I think the entirety of the best supporting actress or actor, one of those categories, the entirety of the category was the cast of the show. So some of these people are very popular and probably can get paid a lot more than that. Like Carrie Coon, for example. A lot of these people work with HBO, by the way. Carrie Coon is on The Golden Age, and which is coming back in just a couple of months, by the way. And then we have, who was I thinking of? Well, anyway, but in other seasons, we obviously saw like cast members from The Sopranos. And so they recycle their casts, but they obviously have a good relationship with HBO. They want to continue to work with HBO. And of course, you want to be on the show that everybody's talking about.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, it's $40,000 per episode. They said absolutely no negotiation of salary. Everybody gets the exact same. And I think, I'm less certain of this number, they said that the entire season cost $4 million.
No, that's not possible.
That's what they said.
Wow. I have to double check that just for the fact that these TV shows have gotten so insanely expensive. But
yeah, we actually, my husband and I were remarking on how little it was. So I could have it wrong.
I mean, they are shooting in Thailand too, but if that number is even close to correct, this is a cash cow for HBO.
Yeah.
To have a show that is basically as popular as House of the Dragon, let's say, it costs nowhere, not even like the special effects budget, less than the special effects budget on maybe one episode of House of the Dragon. So that is an astonishing statistic. I'll definitely have to check that out. But it definitely does not cost anywhere near what some of these other shows cost. And yeah, so basically it's just an incredible success here for HBO. How successful the season has been and the episode will be.
I Googled.
Sure.
Time
fact checking.
I think it must have been real-time fact-checking. I think maybe it was $4 million total in salary. The budget was $48 million to $56 million, according to AI, so take it with a grain of salt. But each episode was made on a budget between $6 and $7 million.
Okay, yeah, that was about to say when you started reading it, I actually thought you were going to say that the $4 million was per episode. But regardless, it would be, even that is a bargain considering how hugely successful this is. I mean, there are shows out there that cost more than $4 million per episode, or in this case, even $6 million. But some even $3 or $4 million per episode for newer shows that basically never get a second season and hardly anybody ever watches them. Some of these streamers spend an incredible amount of money. And of course, we just saw the Succession, of course, Severance. We just wrapped up there. And the reports that was $20 million per episode, which is an astonishing amount of money, especially for that show. Honestly, I mean, I don't know where they spent that money, but that's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, also a whole separate conversation, but I saw a lot of posts about it on social media, not from people I know. Did you see there was a big Severance event over the weekend at
Yeah.
Bell Labs? Yeah.
Yeah. I missed it though. I mean, I went to Bell Labs just a few weeks ago. I wish I'd known about it. I would have definitely attended. I also saw that they had a big, I think it was the week of the finale. They had a big event at in London, right? So the whole cast was there for a similar Grand Central Station type event. But man, Bell Labs, I wish I'd been there for for that. I have to catch up on social media on the photos and everything. But that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it looked super cool. Apparently there was like an event that you had to be invited to, I guess, on Saturday. And then on Sunday, I guess they just left all of this stuff there, creating a Lumen type atmosphere, and you could go check it out.
I got to tell you, I probably will go, especially if they keep some segment of the like a set or something. I was really surprised in going there that it is a functional space, obviously, and they still shoot there. You still see some of the exteriors and some of the interiors are still shot there in season 2 of this is Severance we're talking about. But what's interesting about it is that they didn't have. I almost expected there would be somewhere where they would have like the cubicles set up and part of the sets because that's what everybody wants to see. And I mean, this place is massive. It's like the size of an airplane hangar. They definitely have space to put in some of the living sets of that show if they wanted to make a tourist attraction out of it. So before we get into the episode, a couple more things I wanted to bring up. One is I have a new challenge. We had a lot of fun with the challenge, getting to 100 subscribers on YouTube. And thanks everybody for that. That was a lot of fun. A lot of feedback from the audience. Loved it. So a new challenge. So the finale of season 2 of The White Lotus was our biggest, most popular episode ever on the podcast until just this year. We had last year, I should say, we had the Ripley episode, which for some reason, I mean, I love that you guys listen to it, but for some reason, people love that episode of the show and we still get downloads on it. So I wish I could.
It's so random.
I wish I could understand why that episode is so much more popular than everything else. If you guys have feedback on that, please let me know. But was our most popular episode, and just recently eclipsed by not the finale, but the penultimate episode of Paradise, which was a real conversation piece if you watch that show. So this is all to say that I want to set a new record with our listenership, and I need all of you folks out there to simply share us. So if you have anybody that you watch The White Lotus with who doesn't listen to us, just share our episode, put it on social media, text it to them, target someone who's close to you who you think will listen to the podcast, or just post it randomly on your social media. And of course, we will also be posting this on YouTube. So if you want to share it on YouTube, but I'd love to see us get a record number of downloads for the podcast and or the YouTube video. That would be a lot of fun.
What counts as a listen? If someone only listens for 3 minutes and decides they can't stand us, does that still count as a listen?
Yeah, I think if they listen for more than a few seconds, it goes in as a listen. And I will check that out, like to see like how many people actually listen to the significant number of the portion of the episode. We will see that if our stats are really bad, like everyone just quits about 4% of the way through the episode, which is not the case most of the time. I have to say, we have a surprising number of our listeners listen to every single moment of this podcast, which is fantastic. And thank you everybody for listening. I take that as encouragement. We get negative reviews every once in a while, but I take it as encouragement that most people are listening to the episode all the way through. So they want to hear what we have to say. And I really do appreciate it so much. But yeah, cheers. And maybe we'll find some new fans, but I will update you all on how we did next week and see if we can push through. Honestly, The White Lotus this season, our coverage has been very popular, and there's always a kick on the finale, as more people binge us and binge the show and, get caught up on the social media conversation. So we might do it anyway, but hey, if you share us with your friends and family and put us on your socials, we'll probably do even better. So thank you if you choose to do that. And sharing us, of course, is how we primarily grow the audience. So thanks again. A couple more news things I want to bring up. Oh, first of all, just podcast news. We continue to discuss Mobland, Darren and I later this week. And Black Mirror is coming back this week with its most recent season. I did a whole season the whole series retrospective and the season breakdown last year and a half ago, I guess it is now, when the most recent season came up. I'll be doing the same thing again. That was a very popular episode for us, by the way, Sona. So I'll be definitely including a Black Mirror coverage episode somewhere, probably next week, because of course, Sona, I can't publish it on Friday because we will be discussing Your Friends and Family, our next week-to-week watch.
Starting already? Exciting.
On Friday, yeah. So this is like this was when I saw this on the schedule. I'm like,
perfect.
It's just kismet. We literally end one show and a few days later start the next. And a show that I'm very excited about. And by the way, I think touches on a lot of the themes that we see here in this show as well. The whole idea of being on the hedonic wheel and never being satisfied. And that is exactly what that show is. So if anybody's not familiar with that, that is going to be our next watch. It's the new Jon Hamm series on Apple TV. Of course, if you've been watching Severance, you already have Apple TV. Keep it active for a couple more months at least. And we will be covering that show where Jon Hamm ends up stealing from his rich neighbors because he is losing his job. It almost is like a sequel to The White Lotus, perhaps. This is what Tim is going to do when he gets home. Who knows? And that is a continuation thematically, I think, of some of these things. And not only does he start to steal these things that his rich neighbors don't even notice because they have so much abundance that they're not even not aware of the things that they're losing. But as he's breaking into these homes, he starts discovering their secrets. And it turns out not all these people's lives are so perfect. Again, thematically tying into The White Lotus.
Love that.
So I think it's going to be a really good conversation. I mean, I think we're going to be just segueing thematically from one show right into the other. And that starts on Friday, and we will be discussing it here. First 2 episodes, I think it's 10 episodes. So it'll be 2 months of coverage on that one. And starting this week. So busy here on the podcast, of course. Black Mirror, White Lotus, Black Mirror. Black Mirror will be coming this week as well. So probably in the middle of next week, that episode will come. Oh, and there's so many other things. The biggest show on TV, practically, The Last of Us, is coming back this weekend as well. I'll be watching that. I don't know where I'll post some review somewhere. But anyway, a lot of stuff going on. But the thing we'll be covering week to week for sure is Your Friends and Neighbors, on Apple TV Plus. One more piece of news, one thing related to the show specifically. There was a lot of hubbub this week about the fact that the composer, I've been such a fan of the theme music this year. The composer had some falling out with Mike White and says he will not come back for the next season. So unfortunate, considering they have this great partnership. And this season is probably more than a year away, probably within a year and a half away by the time they write and shoot and, edit and publish those next episodes. By the time that all happens, maybe they'll come to some accord. I do hope so, because I think the theme music is so central to this show.
I love the theme. I assume that the show has some sort of rights to this particular piece and variations of it or something, but who knows? I don't know how that works. But one thing I noticed that's kind of funny is I saw a commercial a few days ago for Amazon Pharmacy that had a very similar background music to The White Lotus. And we were watching a Yankee game, and they were using the Severance music in a Yankee game. So I think this, the exact music and versions of this music are like transcending the show, being used in all sorts of contexts where I wouldn't expect to hear them.
I do start to think if it's just people ripping each other off, or just because of TikTok culture of remixing other people's music and using AI, making it even easier now. If it is just someone like, make something that sounds like the Severance theme.
I think sometimes it is something like it. The Yankee one I thought was precisely the Severance music, but I don't have the best ear for it. It might have been a variation.
Yeah, I do wonder if we're going to see more and more of that. But it's also interesting that when you have these certain themes that catch in the public consciousness, that if you just do that exact thing and you say, let me just buy the rights to that to put into my ad, because you need to grab people's attentions immediately. And there's one way to do it. As soon as you hear that music,
right,
you recognize it immediately. Oh, and I will post this on YouTube, by the way, as part of the falling out with the composer, apparently, was the fact that Mike White decided to not use the full theme And that full theme integrates all the other themes from the previous seasons. And he, as part of his like goodbye to the White Lotus project, posted on YouTube that version of the theme. So I'll include it. Check the show notes. I'll include the link to his his own YouTube video where he has the longer version of the theme, which I thought was very interesting, bringing in all the, like when the music picks up, which is what we hear in this current version of it, that the other themes start coming in towards the end. It was an interesting piece of work. I do understand why Mike White truncated it. I prefer it without the augmentation, but it is interesting to hear the other theme elements coming in.
Yeah, I think you sent me that link and I listened. I did actually listen to it. And I think I agree with you. And I definitely enjoyed this season's theme more than the prior two.
Yeah, I especially think when we get to, well, we're going to get into the episode right now, but I do think it is more apropos considering how this season ends in many ways. And I'm very curious to get, maybe we save it for the end, but I'm very curious to get your feel for how you thought this ended this season and the season itself, and how your reaction to it compared to the previous ones.
I'm still processing, but I do have some thoughts.
Good. Oh, one last piece of information, one last piece of news I wanted to bring up briefly. We already discussed this, Darren and I, on the previous episode, but Val Kilmer, of course, died this week. And do you have what's your relationship with Val Kilmer?
My relationship with Val Kilmer that I don't see talked about nearly enough, rest in peace, Val Kilmer, is Real Genius. Mm-hmm. Why aren't people talking about Real Genius? That is an amazing movie. I will watch it every time I find it on. I still laugh at it. The ending scene is spectacular with the popcorn. Mm-hmm. That to me is much more how I relate to Val Kilmer than Iceman or, all of the other cultural touchstones. How about you?
Yeah, on the podcast, I mean, he was in Heat, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. He wasn't a very good Batman, but I saw that movie in movie theaters, so that was very culturally important to me at the time. Nicole Kidman in that as well, so another Nicole Kidman touch point. We have to mention Nicole Kidman at all times when we can on this podcast. So there's all these, obviously we grew up watching him and seeing him get sick and having a comeback and being in Top Gun Maverick in a very emotional scene just recently when he was apparently dying finally of this disease, which I think he was been struggling with it for over 10 years.
A long time, yeah.
But yeah, when I discussed this with Darren, I recommended 3 comedies, which was Top Secret, Real Genius.
Top Secret is great. I haven't thought about that movie in a long time.
And which I think was his very first movie, by the way. And Real Genius, of course, which was 85, just 1 year later. And then decades later, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which he's so funny.
I never saw that one.
Oh, so good. It's like basically Robert Downey Jr.'s comeback, which got him the Iron Man role. And he's an actor who is, partnered with Val Kilmer, who is a cop who he's shadowing. And Val Kilmer steals every single scene he's in. He's extremely flamboyant, but he's a really flamboyant, tough guy. And he's just so funny. He's so good at that. And you forget how good he is in comedy. And there he is 20 years later, still having these great comedy chops. So yeah, do check him out. Yeah, comedies as well as, everybody thinks about those big budget films. Some of them were kind of flops, to be honest, as the ones that were supposed to be the hits. And, these like smaller comedies, he's just fantastic in. So anyway, R.I.P.
I feel like Real Genius is like very emblematic of that time period as well. Like, I don't think they would ever make a movie like that today.
Yeah.
Which is kind of goofy. It's kind of inappropriate.
Mm-hmm. Top Secret.
I really enjoy it.
Even worse, but yeah. But very entertaining. And yeah, like you said, movies that wouldn't be made today. So let's get into the episode, which is called Amor Fati. Not Amor Fati. Amor Fati. Although I do like Chelsea's pronunciation of it later. Tim can make a killer pina colada. Am I right or am I right?
Why?
This really shows you how bad it is when people don't have their phones, because it's like, what could be like a culturally appropriate, sweet drink that I could hide a poison in if I wanted to? Not necessarily pina colada. That's what he goes for right away, pina colada.
Well, it needed to be something that has to be made in a blender.
True, and
So
sweet.
that does
Has to
make
be
it.
sweet, kind of to hide that taste of that. And the seeds, of course, these are the seeds of the fruit. So last week we were like saying, like, man, how do they have this fruit on? No, but the reality is,
Right.
you can make the seeds of an apple, for example, have cyanide in it. That's why, like, apple juice and apple cider has a certain amount of cyanide in it because the seeds always end up in there. So yeah, seeds being toxic is not uncommon. Apparently, these are some big seeds.
Yeah.
So lots of toxin in there.
Like a stone fruit, like a peach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So yeah, the title, Amor Fati. So this idea, this concept is the love of fate. So it's the idea that kind of what Chelsea says there, whatever will be the idea that you are fated, that like your life is predestined. And rather being like, man, life is so futile. What's the point? It's to accept the good and the bad and just be like, yeah, whatever will be, will be. So just appreciate what you have, live in the moment, which does correlate with Buddhism to some extent. So there's some overlap there. And another thing that it correlates, if you even just Google Amor Fati, you immediately see Nietzsche referenced, because Nietzsche has the idea of the eternal return, which is always correlated to Amor Fati, which is the idea that in one of Nietzsche's writings, there's this concept that history just repeats itself over and over again, the same forms. So we have that title earlier, that the same something, different forms, but the idea that you travel through time over and over again, fated to do the exact same things over and over again. And instead of considering that a torment of some kind, to think about it as a gift in a way, to learn to appreciate all the good and the bad of life together. So I bring this all up because
it's known for being kind of nihilistic, no?
I mean, I think that he literally has that when he mentions the eternal return. It's a demon, he says, that comes. Imagine that a demon comes and tells you that this is what you're fated to do. And then at the end of it, and that's why he may be considered nihilistic, but at the end of it, he goes, would you perceive him as a demon or would you perceive him as an angel, basically? So the idea being that it's all about your perspective. If you do believe that life is fated and that there's going to be bad and good with everything that you experience, do you see that as a torment or do you appreciate that? I did want to put that all out there as context because I do think that Amor Fati and even more so maybe Nietzsche's thoughts around it are very much caught up, I should say, investigated here in the characters, specifically with the three blondes, which I think we'll talk about in just a bit.
Well, everything you're saying also dovetails with that intro voiceover about Buddhism and seeking a resolution and how that causes more suffering than if you just kind of lived in the moment and let things play out their way they're going to play out, which, not that you asked me, but it's something that I've always struggled with, that idea. I love the idea of living in the moment, living the question, not focusing on a resolution, but then also, right, at least it's a Western way of thinking, that you are the decision maker in your own life and you drive certain outcomes. And why would you just sit back and let things happen to you? Because then if you are unhappy in your life, don't you have a responsibility to make decisions to steer yourself towards a happier outcome?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's very liberating to think that your actions are fated in a way, right? People are terrified.
Whatever will be, will be.
Oh, right. That people are terrified by it, but everybody, if you accept the fact that no, you really can have very limited control over what happens to you, and that don't be jealous of what that other person has, because they will have in their cycle of life, they'll have their downturns. It's not as good as you perceive it from the outside, that everybody's going through all of this. And honestly, thematically, I think that is what Mike White is trying to explore in all these seasons of the show. And I think you're absolutely correct. That opening conversation or sermon, I guess, that the monk is giving, he specifically says it, that there is no resolution in life itself. I find that very funny in the context of this show, because my frustration throughout the course of this show and the negative conversations you heard about the show in general was all this, there was no resolution. They keep saying that this is going to happen. You know, the gun gets stolen, but then Guy Talk just gets it back. And like everybody was complaining about this. And I think that was very much intentional on Mike White's in his intentionality here in writing this, that he's trying to make us sit in the unknown, basically, and the unresolved. Although he does give us finally here in this episode definite resolution to many of the storylines here.
Yeah, and I think also just touching on something you said about hearing mixed feelings about this season.
Mm-hmm.
I will say I really was looking forward to this finale. I was so excited on Sunday. It's White Lotus night. It's the series finale, season finale. So whatever might have been right or wrong about the season, I think I actually look forward to this season finale more than the other seasons, although I binge watched season 1, so that doesn't really count. But so I think that says something for how the series hooked people.
Yeah, I think you also see it in the ratings, that the ratings were really growing towards the end. And I think you're absolutely right that however it worked, it was because there wasn't this earlier resolution to some of these storylines, and we don't know how it's going to resolve at all. Everything got resolved in this final episode. That, of course, everybody was waiting with bated breath for it to end. I also want to mention the fact that this was a 1.5 hour episode. It did not feel long at all. Like I was totally locked in the entire time. Yeah, so
agree.
I wasn't sitting there going like, okay, I just want to know who died. Can we fast forward through this scene? I was just like totally locked in, because we're getting so much, to your point earlier of your anticipation. All these kind of conversations we want people to have and things they want them to say, they all happened in this episode. So
yes,
payoff after payoff.
A lot of the ambiguities that I was complaining about earlier, a couple of episodes ago, feel to me like they were resolved in a satisfactory way.
Yeah, I agree. So let's start off with the Ratliffs here. Piper. I'm very curious to know what you think as far as your issues with her being underwritten and not having any interiority. I can read this a couple of different ways, so I'm curious to see what you think. That Lachlan's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay here for a year. We saw Lachlan have an even more negative reaction to eating the food, for example, something she complains about later. So she sits there and she thinks to herself, am I going to do this to him? And she says, I don't want to only screw up your life. I just want to screw up my own. So she sees this in a potentially negative light, that she's screwing up her life. I'm not sure taking a gap year when you're right out of college is going to screw up your life, to be honest with you. But regardless, that's her perception of it. So is she telling Victoria exactly what she wants to hear because she honestly is like, I can't do this, it's too awful? Or is she saving Lachlan, or is she uncomfortable with doing this with Lachlan there? What's your read on everything that happens here?
I agree with you. It's open to interpretation. In my mind, she is a dilettante. She loved the idea of this. And I think so many of us go through this phase in college. I'm not trying to come down hard on her for it. I think we all have these romantic ideas of philosophy and what it means to exist, and, you know, the type of person we aspire to be with all of these deeply held thoughts and beliefs and philosophies. And all of it sounds amazing when it is theoretical. But then when you put it into practice, it's something else. And so I think she had romanticized this idea, you know, to the point, as I've said many times, you don't have to do a year. You could just start with a week or two.
Sure. Exactly.
Nobody's forcing you. I mean, maybe this particular program forces you to commit for a year, but I'm sure she could find someplace else where she could just go for a week or two. I think when push came to shove, I think she was being honest in her conversation with Victoria. I think she was scared and embarrassed and ashamed to voice those things. And I think Parker Posey was amazing in that scene. You can kind of, first of all, I think she's come off the lorazepam hangover. She just seems so much more alert in this episode than she had been. But you can kind of see her eyes starting to light up, like it's gonna.
Yes,
she's gonna say she doesn't want to do it, and trying to like not push her, let her come to it on her. I loved everything about that scene, but I think she was being honest in that scene, that she realized she didn't really want to do it. What was your take?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I actually watched this episode twice. Once I just watched it. The second time I watched it, and I fast forward through some scenes, but just to take notes. And especially the second time around, the first time around, I think it was more ambiguous to me. I felt like she might be doing a performance because of Lachlan's involvement in the whole thing. But I think that when she starts when the floodgates open, she's being very honest about it. So I think that maybe if Lachlan hadn't gone, she might have committed more strongly to it just to see it through. But then she allowed herself to be like, well, let me, try to get Lachlan off my tail. And as soon as she allowed that thought in, the whole thing, like you said, the whole thing just fell apart. And by the way, I don't criticize her for that either, because I think that happens to a lot of people, when you're like dedicated to being a lawyer. Well, you are a lawyer, but some people like go to college with these grand ambitions. And then after they're really committed to it. And maybe after semester one, they're already like, I don't know about this, but they kind of keep doubling down. And then eventually they're just like, I don't think I can do this.
I always had so much respect for the people that only finished one semester of law school, because I felt like, you realize pretty soon in that this was not for you, and it was better to get out early. I think that was the right decision if it's not for you. And I think also Piper is in a place of privilege where she can entertain the idea of doing this, right? Many of us, when we graduate from school, need to go out into the real world and start making money to pay bills. So we don't have that option, regardless of our philosophical aspirations of the type of person we want to be. We need to pay our bills. She has that option of possibly indulging that side of her. So I don't blame her for looking into it.
Right.
And I give her credit for realizing it wasn't for her.
And similarly, you can look at it from the outside and be like, wow, how privileged that she could just change her mind after spending all this money. But that's what everybody does, right? Like you have different levels of privilege, but many of us can quit after one semester of school, and some people don't have that as an option, right? So yeah, I found it all very believable. I want to touch on a few things you brought up. I thought, first of all, maybe they've styled her this way, or maybe it's just me paying attention more, but I had never noticed until I forgot to bring this up maybe 2 episodes ago, that Piper looks so much like Victoria that they've really styled them, where, especially this episode when she's talking to her, even like some of these little mannerisms are like, oh my God, they really could be mother and daughter. So very cleverly done. I also love the fact, like you mentioned, that I was annoyed by the Victoria performance earlier in the season, but it's the shift when she's off the lorazepam. I'm like, oh, I understand what they were going for here. She's becoming more and more like the decision maker in the family as she comes off of the drugs, right? So I see that.
Totally aware of her surroundings. She acknowledged she was in Thailand.
Finally, yeah.
She cleared
a toast to Thailand. She's just like, yeah, Thailand. She didn't really have anything to say beyond
Don't let the door get you on the way out, essentially.
Exactly. And I do want to shout out that Parker Posey was so incredible in this performance, but at the same time, this is the type of person that I really dislike very strongly. So it's like, she is incredible, and at the same time, I hated her. The way she was just like, she was so excited, like, oh, it's all falling apart right in front of my eyes, and she's so happy. She's so happy about it.
So entertaining. I get what you're saying, but the entertainment value to me exceeds it. Yeah. If I knew her in real life, I would want to sit next to her at every lunch just to hear.
Oh, you would want to
out of her mouth. Yeah. I would love it.
No, I mean, I agree that her performance is incredible, but I was like, at the same time, like my skin was crawling because I hate that type of interaction. At the same moment that I thought she was brilliant. It was so funny, so funny. I mean, the way she could barely contain herself. She was so to Tim. Meanwhile, by the way, I don't even know if Tim's reaction was supposed to be as funny as it was to me.
Hysterical, because in his head, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off, but I'm just so excited.
Go ahead.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to kill Virtue.
How many of these people do I have to kill? Oh my God, his face just was so classic. I mean, they leaned into it, by the way. There's this cutaway where you see him like in the total sourpuss face, but that's not the one that cracked me up. It was the subtler version of it, of him just watching the conversation and his face starts to fall and he's just like, oh, I have to kill her too. Oh my God. I was like laughing out loud and probably not supposed to be, but it was very funny.
I think it was supposed to be funny. It was hysterical. It was so clear what he was thinking to me.
One more thing I want to bring up before we move on to the next set of characters is Victoria's conversation point, which I thought is intriguing. This philosophy, of course, all of this, by the way, there are all these philosophies we see in this episode of the show and maybe this season across the board, but specifically in this episode, which culminates so many things, but these different philosophies. And her philosophy, which I think is a doozy, right? But it's like, it is something that I think people do believe, that I've heard similar things from people. This idea that rather than, Amor Fati, right? Rather than this is my fate, is that we're going to be incredibly rich and successful. And rather than feeling guilty about it, we should indulge it to the fullest. We owe it. We owe it to those less fortunate. And I do think there is a real cultural belief in this. I think about how we are addicted to looking at celebrities online, and they are basically living these hedonistic lives, and maybe not even living that way. They're just presenting it. And we just sit back and watch it as spectators. And maybe it is. And maybe she's closer to the truth, I should say, than not.
I mean, at the time she was saying that, I thought actually the natural end of the sentence is you owe it to give back to society when you are so privileged. But I mean, I guess I can follow the reasoning. I think when you are wealthy, although she's not at that moment in time, but she doesn't know that yet, you can really, there's room for both. Why not both?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I do agree that having this, I don't agree with her perspective. I just do think that is probably a legitimate perspective, that people are like, well, this is what I have and I'm going to enjoy it, period.
To be fair, it was never directly addressed. For all we know, they have got a wing at the hospital named after them. We don't know.
Right.
It was never addressed.
But it never feels like, it feels like that's something that she would have brought up to Piper, for example, and being like, well, make a lot of money. And then, by the way, this is exactly what we hear in season 1 of The White Lotus, right? Where you have the new wife is dealing with the fact that she is surrendering her principles for this luxury. And then the mother-in-law shows up and is just saying like run a charity or something, don't throw this away because you feel guilty about it. So, I mean, there is a lot of paralleling here between seasons, I think, and that's one of them right there. All right. Still speaking of the Radcliffes, let's talk about Lachlan and Saxon. This is very funny. Their interactions. This is literally word for word the things we said in our analysis, that he's a people pleaser. He is trying to give his brother what he thinks he wants. He's always trying to read the room and just do what he's expected to do. And he literally just says all those words. It was hilarious. I'm like, well, that's pretty, that's like psychology 101 or something that he's just spewing out there, which could just be a convenient excuse that he's coming up with. But I do think that he's being honest there, because we did have this kind of question as to like, what is Lachlan's deal? And maybe he is just, I'm just here to, accommodate everybody else.
Yeah, I think whether it's objectively true or not, I think that is what he believes. And I think we have seen that in that we've seen him try and ingratiate himself with Saxon to an extreme level.
Right.
we've seen him try and ingratiate himself with Piper as well. And he kind of would just like slip back and forth between them.
Yeah.
And clearly just so badly wants to be accepted and loved and do right by them. That sounds like a sick thing to say in the context that we're saying it in. And I loved Saxon's response of, I know you worship me, but don't worship me. Thought was very funny. So, this is one of the characters that I had quibbles about the ambiguity, and I felt like it was driven home in a satisfactory way.
Yeah, I think they explain him better, and maybe he finally, I was trying to find some depth in him, and maybe he's a young person also, so maybe you're just not that deep at that age anyway. Although he does see God in a really beautiful near-death sequence here, that the way it's visualized. So maybe this is maybe he has a transformative
do you want to talk about that last sequence, or do you want to wait?
Let's wait until we get,
comments.
Yes, I have we'll basically the way I broke down the conversation is we have this introduction to each character. Then I have the next morning, because a lot of stuff happens the next morning. And then I have the very end, that montage at the end, like where everybody's life is now. So, so we can save that for the next morning, because a lot of stuff happens the next morning.
A lot.
I agree with everything you say that, there's not a lot of depth to his character, but maybe that is intentional, kind of explaining him. And not as satisfied as I am with the Piper character, although I do like the way they ended up using her and how this kind of revealed aspects of herself, of the family, of privilege, of Victoria, but I still feel like she was a device. And there's another character we're going to talk about in a moment that I also think is just basically a device in the show. And unfortunately, I think Piper fell into that. I did find Lachlan interesting in the fact that I was trying to get a read on him, and then maybe there really is no read on him, but that is part of his character to some extent.
He is a little lost. Yeah. I think that is part of the point for him.
Right. Then, of course, we have the sequence, Tim and, before we get to that, the suicide tree situation and Tim finding asking about it and telegraphing what his intentions there. But I guess, you're not expecting someone at this luxury resort is actually planning suicide.
A mass suicide. Murder-suicide.
Exactly. I forget what they call it, the family, when you kill your whole family. I forget there's a terminology for that. But I do like the fact that Tim is so desperate. This is another that made me laugh. So desperate for finding anybody. He doesn't even have a heart-to-heart with Lachlan. He's just like, Lachlan, you'll be okay if you had nothing, right? And he's like, yeah, I'd be okay. He's like, good. That's the extent of the conversation.
He was just kind of like, someone's got to carry on the bloodline. So
he's like,
it's going to be you.
One person will survive. That's good.
Yeah. You affirmatively told me that you can't survive unless you're ridiculously wealthy. So it's going to be you. But I mean, this kid would be in therapy for the rest of his life if he was there with his Coke and everybody else drank a poison milkshake and dropped dead around him.
Could you imagine? That's how crazy that would be. He also would be there, so he could maybe call for help. So anyway, I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim didn't really understand the amount of poison necessary. I have questions about whether this could have been successfully completed in any case. But I did love when Tim snaps at Lachlan. Not you. You're not.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I was kind of surprised that Lachlan wasn't like, but you could make me a virgin one. Like it. Right. There are other solutions that, would have worked to Lachlan's mind, I think, but he just accepted, like, I'll have a Coke.
There's a couple of very funny line readings by this actor, by the way. One of them was when he says, you're not 21, so you can't have one. And he just goes, sucks. But he has like a few little asides that way. And I was just like, what a hilarious line reading. He just like accepts everything. He's just like, sucks. He has another one the next morning. I forget what he says, but it's the same type of thing. And this is the one thing that I did bump. Maybe the only thing I bumped up against in this episode was that Tim then slaps the drinks out of their hands. I'm like, how many times are they going to have this fake out with the killing of the family? I was like, this is one too, for me, this was one too many. To do it again? Exactly. Either kill them or drop this plot line. I'm like, I'm done with it. But it was like, yeah, it was just like one too many. I mean, I'm not saying that they should have definitely killed the family off. I'm just saying that they could have like just not had this, like literally making the shake. It was like one more rug pull. And I'm like, we're in the finale. Like, do we need another rug pull? Like, it was a little too much. And then, of course, that it comes back yet again when Lachlan eventually drinks the shake. I'm like, okay, I got it. Enough. Right. Okay, let's talk about Rick and Chelsea. I got to tell you, there was a couple of times in this episode that I choked up. This isn't the one, but, or maybe there was actually even here, but the Rick and Chelsea story, it hit me pretty hard. So Rick wakes up. He has been partying with Frank in Bangkok. He did not partake of the goods. Frank has been up all...
like the exact same position we left him, I think.
Exactly, yeah. He just fell asleep right in that chair. Yeah. And he wants to get back to Chelsea. So he's made up his mind. He has, unburdened himself in his own way without killing anybody, luckily, at this moment. And then, of course, there's, and he ends things with Frank. And there's a pretty funny sequence where Frank's running around in underwear. And, he's been up all night, I think, partying, like still probably coked out of his mind. And anyway, he's having a good time. But Rick wants no part of it. And he's ready to go back. He knows what he wants. He wants to be with Chelsea. And when Saxon and Chelsea are talking, and Saxon's like, I read the book. And you're like, where's this going? But then they reunite on the beach. Oh, this was just incredible. And Saxon watching that and longing for that thing he doesn't have. What a great performance by Schwarzenegger, by the way. His face.
Amazing.
Yeah.
He was so great in this whole season. I really have a lot of respect for him. I think he's a great actor.
Yeah. And just like seeing him just internalizing all of that. And then turning to Chloe and being like, sorry about me backing out last night. And Chloe putting salt in the wound where he's just like, that's the thing I don't have, like turning this way. And then he turns the other way. And this is what he gets, is like gets to be a prop in Chloe's fantasy life. And she's like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll find someone else. It's easy.
Lime a dozen.
Like, not only is this all you're good for, you're easily replaceable. Don't worry. Mm-hmm. Just not what he needed to hear at that moment. And then, of course, that night, they are, that's where she's talking about Amor Fati. Whatever will be, will be. And then, the dinner scene is so sweet. And like Rick in his own way.
Okay, hang on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I want your feedback. But the thing for me was when she's telling this, and for me, Rick's response. And Rick not able to tell her, I love you. Not able to be emotionally available to her. But then when she says that, I think we're linked for life. And he goes, well, that's the plan. And she is so happy to hear that. Like, she knows that that's his version of saying he's committing to her. But as soon as that scene happened, I'm like, oh, God, these guys are doomed.
Well, I agree that this is somebody that is largely emotionally unavailable. Mm. And that is his way of communicating that.
Yes.
However, begin with last week's representation of how she sees their relationship and that basically she's trying to save him. I don't know. Maybe I'm bringing too much of a real world perspective to this, but I feel like, you know what? You're a grown woman accepting crumbs from an emotionally unavailable man. Mm. I don't know if this is a smart decision for you. And in fact, it was not.
I agree that it's a bad decision that she's stuck with him. I do agree.
I think it's a real love there. I'm not trying to take away from that. Yeah. And I've felt that tenderness all along. But the fact that even in these circumstances, with him saying he's found peace now and he is able to move forward, he still can't make those words come out of his mouth. Right. I love you too. I missed you too. Mm-hmm. Yes, we will be together. Not like that's the plan. Sounds like, it's in God's hands, which it was.
It was.
But you see what I'm saying? I don't know. I'm a little bit soured on the tenderness between them because
it's unhealthy for her.
She needed to grow up.
See, I completely see where you're coming from, but for her, her perception is that they were meant to be together. Unfortunately, she did think that they were fated to be together, and indeed they were. So, that's in a way she was correct. but it is tragic, even more tragic. I mean, Romeo and Juliet, etc. This is like not an unseen.
But they were teenagers.
True. But aren't we all teenagers forever now, Sona? Isn't that true?
Feels that way sometimes.
But anyway, so the but I actually did think that in his own way, in the context of this relationship, that she was getting what she wanted, in that she had made this commitment and had this expectation. And he, in his own way, was saying, we are going to be together forever. So I did feel it there legitimately. But most of what I felt, like I said, most of what I felt is like, these people are definitely dying.
Impending doom.
Yes, exactly. So unfortunately, it's sweet and ominous at the same time in the context of the show.
I felt like, I hope you're ready for a lifetime of taking crumbs and reading between the lines, because this guy is not going to grow up, man.
Hey, Greg and Chloe, right? So there you go. But these are adults; they can make their own choices. And maybe if she's always going to be attracted to this type of guy, this is a soulful dude. This is not a jerk, right? So, although he's got his issues. He's got issues. No doubt about it.
She was pushing him to do so much work on himself, but in the end, I think had she done more work on herself, she would have found a healthier relationship, and she'd probably still be alive today.
And she'd be alive today, this very moment. The actress is alive, by the way. Just everybody, so you know. She's okay. She's fine.
I did read, speaking of their real world lives, that the actor who plays Rick, his wife had taken her own life.
Oh my God.
Years and years ago, I think. Yeah. But in processing the grief of that, he went to Thailand.
Wow.
And filming this season was very hard for him because it brought up so many memories of what he had gone through, grieving her, and a lot of the darkness in Rick is kind of real because he was feeling a lot of that darkness himself.
Well, I had no idea about that. But I mean, Walton Goggins is just terrific as an actor in general, but really great in this role. And that makes perfect sense that like, a lot of that soulfulness that we see on the screen is probably him just channeling what happened, right? It's incredibly, I mean, I think I forget who he replaced. There was another actor who was playing this role.
Oh, really?
I think he was going to play Frank. And then there was another actor playing this role. And then I forget how, I have to do my research maybe before the next time we meet and reread that. But it is interesting because this would be a really, I mean, maybe you want to process those emotions, so you put yourself in that circumstance. But this would be, I mean, if he was in Thailand, after subsequent to his wife killing herself, wow, like I can't imagine the pain he must have had. Like he must have had some real tough moments there. But anyway, it just adds to the kind of the courage of his performance here.
Yeah, the depth of it.
Sure, absolutely. Let's move over to Mook and Guy Tak. This is the other character I think that really just becomes like a device in the show.
I had a feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Mook is obviously a beautiful girl and just a singer. So I don't think she's acted before. So she does a really good job of, having a presence on screen and performing her lines. I mean, I'm not familiar with the language, but she seems to be doing an excellent job of all of that. And just like her facial expression, she seems to show this empathy. But as a character, I mean, just in this one episode, I had pegged her early on as like a femme fatale type character. Because of this, she really just becomes like a device, like something that Guy Tak wants. But what does she want? She generically has this, she's attracted to him when it looks like he's going to get the promotion. Then she's disappointed. And there's a generous way to read that she is disappointed that he's not as aggressive or maybe not thinking enough about the future and what kind of life she wants to have with him. But then it's just like, oh, he, kills somebody. He gets the promotion. Great. I'm in love with him, so it's just like, this was just too wishy-washy and like not well-defined at all, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't love it. I did think for me, it was less ambiguous than it had been in the past, that she is willing to be with him as long as he is willing to be ambitious by her definition.
Right.
So I appreciated the clarity of that, which, you know, we could have guessed at before, but it wasn't 100% clear. But it did seem that her character just existed as a driver for Guy Talk's plot.
Right. It's just like the thing he wants to get. And then the way that really, when you think about the end, is that him defining himself over and over again as a Buddhist, and that how he has to violate that by the end of the episode, and how he's rewarded by it. So like the world rewards you for breaking that potentially. And we'll talk about where the show ends for each one of these characters. But then where is she in this? She's just there giving him a hug. It really becomes this very, exactly, just very much like a, just a device to a large extent. On the other hand, another scene here that choked me up in the episode, surprisingly, and I think really pays off so well, was the three blondes who I've had issues with earlier on. And then like they kind of came into their own and became more interesting characters as time progressed, especially towards the end of the season. But this conversation between the three of them, well, let's actually start where the
I love them from the start.
I know you've been a fan of the time. I needed more. And
I wonder how much of that is a gender thing that I could relate to it immediately, whereas you maybe needed some more fleshing out of it.
Right. I agree. I think this is a dynamic that women are more familiar with. I mean, guys are familiar with having these kind of guy friend relationships too, but the dynamic is so different with guy friends that maybe, like you said, this is something that you immediately connected with. And I needed to have a little more explanation to who these people were and what they wanted, etc. So, but I thought this just terrific in this episode. All the performers just do such a great job. But we see Jackie starts off the day. She wants to make amends with Lori. Lori's sleeping in. Of course, she had her adventure the night before that we saw last week. And she doesn't show up for breakfast. But there is this incredible moment before the dinner where Lori is just watching them in the pool. And I was just
don't get there yet.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I loved
the conversation
that Jacqueline finally has taken a step back. And is not as self-centered and realizes like, hey, what did happen to Lori? Is she okay? Has anyone heard from her? And wants to reach out to her. Yeah. And says to, I'm blanking out, Kate?
Mm-hmm. Kate.
Says to Kate, no, I'll go invite her to breakfast.
Right.
And gives her just a straight apology, saying, I want to be your friend.
Yes.
And
really apologizes about the Valentine's situation too, going like, yeah, you're right. He pushed you into it. And then.
Right. And not like not in a passive aggressive way, just affirmatively says what she wants to say that conveys she cares about Lori. Her friendship means something to her.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that from Jacqueline's character. I thought that was really nice. And I love the pool scene that you were at.
And gives Lori, I think, is the nicest thing for me. I like those like kind of small gestures. The nicest thing for me was when she just says to Lori, I want to be your friend.
Yeah.
At the end of that. And then she doesn't even like wait for a response. She goes, I know you're just waking up. Like, let's talk about this later. Like, she's not there to get the apology or whatever.
Right.
Or to hear something. She's there to just be like, I have this to say.
Yeah.
And this is it. We don't even have to bring it up. They even say later when she shows up at dinner, like, oh, I didn't think you were going to come to dinner. So it's like she just said it to say it, to just put it out there. And I thought it was like a really generous. And I mentioned that there was this idea that the cycle, the yin and yang, and that how these women are on this cycle always, right? It's like the cycle of like the darkness and then the light. And then it's not that one ends and the other one begins, or it's all darkness or all light. It's like, no, this is a continuum. And these women have been in this pattern. So this has probably happened before. There's been apologies. But if you have to think like, oh, it's just this endless cycle and it's an empty cycle, it pays off incredibly in the dinner scene when Lori shows up and Jacqueline says some really nice things about her friendship with her friends. And then Kate as well says some really generous things. And then Lori for a moment goes, I've been sad all week. And I'm like, oh no, is she going to take this into a dark way? But that's not what she says. She goes, I don't have a belief system, or rather, she has had belief systems. A mother will make me happy, right? She was criticized for this, that she's never satisfied. And maybe she internalized that and says, you're right. You know, I dedicated myself to my career. I dedicated myself to my relationship. I dedicated myself to being a mother. And none of those things ever fulfilled me. And then she goes, I don't need to have a belief system to tell me that my life is valuable. That time itself, that just the weight of time, just the experience has made it valuable. And that her friends have been there with her the whole time. And that in and of itself, just the companionship has made this bond between them. And I thought this was great.
I loved it. Loved it. Loved it. I thought it was just really beautifully done. I thought it was funny how she started, was it the start or the end? I'm happy you have a beautiful face.
Yes.
Was kind of funny.
Yes.
But
that was the end. Yeah. I'm happy you have a beautiful face.
Was really moving and speaks to the fact that I think they probably see themselves more as sisters who,
yes,
you know, you're committed to each other for life, whatever ups and downs that brings, whatever talking behind the back and sniping that happens, you still in the end are sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, the sisterhood thing, because I think that so much is what siblings have, where oftentimes you have a sibling and you do have nothing in common with them. And you are like, you know, it's surprised that you're been together. Some siblings are extremely, you know, they watch the same movies, they have the same taste. They, you know, there's a lot of, but sometimes it's like the only thing that binds you to this person is the time. But what she's saying is that, like, I have borne witness to all of the things that we've done together and apart. And that in and of itself is the bond. And I thought that was just like, yeah, that's what we all do for each other in the end, right? It was like really a beautiful moment and like great way to see your life. Yeah, I thought it was really an incredible scene here. And yeah, I got a little choked up. I didn't think these girls were going to get to me, but they got to me. And I also love that, like you said, I like towards the end where she says, I love that you have a beautiful face. I love that you have a beautiful life. But yeah, it was really great work. And like to come from Lori at this point, it really felt really touching. One thing I forgot to bring. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying one thing I forgot to bring up. I don't know if it's going to add context to what you're about to say, but we find out that Jacqueline has paid for this whole trip, which is interesting context, by the way, right? It's not like
that at the beginning.
Yeah. In the back of my mind, I was thinking, like, is she dragging her friends into this thing because now she's showing off her wealth and maybe they are financially strapped, but she's paid for all of this. So that really changes a little bit of the dynamic.
No, they had said that in the beginning.
Oh, they did. Okay. I didn't know that. Yeah.
And I was meaning to bring it up in connection with how Lori was antagonizing her, which I think she had the right side of the argument, but also when you're talking to the person who paid for you to be here, it's a little bit dicey. So I kept meaning to bring that up and I forgot. And also, I think I cut you short on the pool scene. So I just wanted to revisit that. Like, it was very sweet, I think, from two perspectives that, you know, you're watching her watch her friends and realizing her bond with them and that she misses them.
Yes.
You know,
yeah.
Even though she's rightfully annoyed with them, she misses them and she wants to be a part of it.
Yeah.
And I also just thought it was so cute, you know, like trying to post the picture and like a very, you know, girl type thing to do. Because it reminded me of when I had gone to the Grand Canyon, I took a walk at sunrise because that's supposed to be, you know, one of the things you do, sunrise and sunset at the Grand Canyon. And there was this group of older women. They were probably in their 70s. They had an iPad. They didn't have a phone. They had an iPad. And they were taking pictures. And one of them said to the other, "Do you want me to take your selfie?" And I thought it was just the sweetest thing that this, you know, 70-some-year-old woman was referring to it as a selfie, even though she was the one taking the picture. And offering to take it for her friend and like telling her friend how to pose. And it reminded me of that bond that women have. Like it's so sweet, just like a girlish thing to do.
Yeah, and like I said, I rewatched parts of the episode twice when I was taking notes, and the moment, that earlier moment, hit me harder the second time around, because the first time I saw it, I'm like, is she like, oh, I'm missing out? Oh, like I couldn't understand what Lori's motivation might be in that moment, and I couldn't even read her expression that much. And then the second time I watched it, the expression was very much like her appreciating what was happening. And then she explicitly says it that night that she's okay just being there to bear witness. That in and of itself makes her, feel connected to them. And I'm like, oh, that's such a great scene. And like beautiful writing writing's not just dialogue, but beautiful writing for him to include that earlier scene and then bookend it with that conversation at dinner. So Mike White, I got to tell you, he's one of the great writers, I think, of the way he writes these scenes and the way he thinks about bookending these moments in an episode or even in a season. I think is really impressive, what he's doing here.
There's a lot of nuance and capitalizing on those little moments in life that we don't necessarily recognize as they're happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that I think is interesting here, maybe we can mention it again later, or we can touch on it again, although we might be moving past the women here, but I just want to introduce it, that I think it's interesting, the idea, once again, thematically, of these different types of relationships and just the cycles of life we see here, that the three women represent. I think you think about Mike White in the featurette afterwards was talking about how he thinks Thailand is such an interesting place to explore these themes, because Thailand has this reputation of being like, that's where criminals go to hide out. And, you can have anything you want in Thailand. And meanwhile, it's also like the center of Buddhism and this, like a lot of these Western, these Far East beliefs, I should say. So it's this interesting duality there, and it's exploring it here within the context of these people who are seeking, but of course hedonistic as well. And I thought about the girls are interesting in that regard as well. You have the hedonist, right? You have the Jacqueline, who's has almost everything she wants, and she can have anybody she wants, and she is still unsatisfied to a large extent, even though she has all these things that on the surface seem to be the things you want to have. Then you have like the Buddha in a large extent. I think about Kate watching them and even like sitting cross-legged when everybody's naked in the pool. And we see that many times, by the way, that image of someone above the crowd of hedonists watching. And we see that happen multiple times throughout the course of the season. And then of Lori, of course, who is the seeker, right? She's saying, I've looked for different models for my life. She's like Frank to an extent. I've tried all these different ways of being, and now coming to this, her own realization. But it's interesting that these characters who I didn't really pay that much attention to early on are almost like the full cycle of thematically of the show are all encapsulated in these three women, right? And the journeys they go on here in the show. Kate, of course, gets to be the one who's just like, I'm happy. She's incredibly privileged, by the way, but she is satisfied with what she has. She appreciates what she gets. She appreciates even the performative hedonism around her. She's just there to suck it all in and be appreciative of it. So in a lot of ways, she's one of the purest people on the show, even though maybe she's not aware of the amount of privilege she has, but she does appreciate what she has. So that's in and of itself is a positive. Someone who's not happy with what they have and wants more is Zion. So let's talk about Belinda and Zion real quick. I got to say, I really liked Zion's early interactions with his mom. He's got a lot of confidence. I really liked how confident he came in there.
And he has $1 million smile, I have to say.
Yes.
Kid's smile lights up a room.
And he tells his mom, we got to try for this thing. $100,000 is not enough, but he's like, just let me do this. I'm going he either has his MBA or is going for his MBA, forget off the top of my head. But he's like, I'm going to do this negotiation. So they go and they visit Greg in his palatial house. And this, first of all, I thought he did a really great job for this kid, like very poised. He's making
He did his research. We have so often complain something could have been resolved with a simple Google.
Just a Google search. He's done his Google search. Yeah. I did find the one time he's really got an incredible, spiel going. He is doing a great job until he gets digressed on that, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun?
Yeah, it was about to turn into a political speech for a second. I don't know.
Or does it explode? I'm like, where's it going? And I love her reaction. She's just like, where are we going here? He's like, well, let me get back on point. So, but I love this negotiation tactic. He goes to $5 million. She immediately starts to choke on her drink. But turns out she's savvier than we thought. All of that is a performance. And she's like, go back in there and close the deal. And he makes a really good pitch that he's just like, look, how much longer are you going to live? I don't know how old this actor is, but he's probably in his 60s or at least 60, I'd say, around there. And what is 1%? Is that your peace of mind worth 1%? Apparently it was. So what did you think about all this?
So first of all, were you surprised they asked for $5 million?
I was shocked. $5 million was a lot.
I thought they would go $1 million.
$1 million, yeah.
Yeah.
$5 million is crazy. I thought it was crazy.
$5 million is, you can do more than open a spa in your hometown with $5 million, I think. So I was surprised by the number. I liked the dynamic between mother and son, but at the same time, conflicted about what's going on and Belinda's values and who I thought she was as a character. And, that plays out later in the episode. But I liked the chemistry between all three of these actors, actually. I thought it was a good scene. I thought it was a fun scene to watch. I actually suspected that maybe there was something pre-rehearsed about how it was going on. I didn't think, though, that she was kind of springing it on her son the way she did. Yeah. So I liked that little surprise. So, I enjoyed watching this. I just, conflicted feelings about how it all plays out.
I mean, I'm torn on it because what's the alternative first of all, I like the fact we didn't see this conversation. Maybe it was shot and it wasn't included. Maybe it felt superfluous. I would have liked to hear Greg speak to her on the fact that I think Tanya, I'm giving this to you for Tanya, that in a way he might feel like Tanya was this mess. At least I do one good thing with her money while I live on my, at my throne again. We have that scene of him. Every time he's at his house, he's sitting up on his throne, witnessing everybody beneath him. So while he just indulges himself in any dream he wants or any indulgence he wants for the rest of his life, and he seems pretty miserable anyway, even with all this money. So maybe this is a positive thing he gets to do. And I do agree that Belinda in a way is compromising her beliefs, right? We see Guy Talk do that as well by the end of this episode. So there is this feeling that she is contradicting her moral beliefs, but none of this is going to bring Tanya back, So if if she's going to go for $1 million and he'll give her 5, then take the 5, I don't, and I totally understand where you are from a moral perspective, but I don't know, $5 million, she could be set up for life. And maybe that's what Tanya wanted anyway.
And hopefully she doesn't get killed, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm glad that she is smart enough to be like, we got to get out of here ASAP. I'm not going to hang out here for
right down the hill from his house.
I mean, think about it. She could live on this resort for the next 3 months because she's there for work training. Right. And her son might be like, hey, let's just hang out here. What are you doing? And she's like, no, he's too close. I want to change my identity and disappear with my $5 million so that he can never kill me. So she is smart enough to know that that is a reality. So
should have given some advice to Rick.
Yes.
Get out.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. So, I wish she had known Rick and given him that advice for sure. One more thing I was going to say about that was, oh man, I can't remember now. Can't remember.
It'll come back.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. And very interestingly here, before we get into the next morning and everything that happens there, one of the things that Belinda does to close her books or her chapter here in Thailand is she had really seriously been contemplating maybe starting a business with Porn Chai and maybe pursuing a relationship with him and all that comes with that. because those were the options she had available to her at that moment. And then all of a sudden, things have changed. And she goes and talks to Porn Chai about this. And I thought this was really interesting because it is mirroring what happened to Tanya when her circumstance changed in season 1. They were talking like Tanya's sitting down going like, let's make a business plan. And all of a sudden she's just like, well, things have changed. And it's interesting that might speak to your point that Belinda's making the wrong choice, that as soon as we correlate her to Tanya and what happened to her, that might be an indication that this wasn't the right choice for her.
I agree with that. I also think that particular storyline felt very constructed to get to that payoff.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I don't think, as opposed to what happened with Tanya, where, yes, they've only known each other for a few days, but Belinda did have this fully formed thought of what she wanted to do.
Right.
I think she asked her son to help her put together a business plan. I think there was a business plan by the end of that first season, I think. It felt more natural and more organic. Here, we questioned at the time how you've known this guy for a few days, you slept with him, and now all of a sudden you're opening a business together? That does not feel organic.
Right.
So I feel like it was all just to get to that payoff.
Sure.
Giving Porn Chai the same line that Tanya gave her.
Yeah.
And I didn't care for it on that level. So I didn't never mind what it says about her character and how she treats people. And that all of a sudden she's a different person now that she has money. I don't know. Because even her son says, now you can open that spa. And she was like, let me enjoy being rich for 5 minutes, which I get.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that she's not going to open the spa.
Yeah.
Which I don't blame her, honestly. But it seems like the money is changing who she is as a person or showing sides of her character that were not particularly shown before. And I just didn't like all of it.
Yeah. I mean, yes. I mean, to be honest with you, I think that we are going to see more of Belinda in future seasons of the show.
Surprised.
And I think so. A lot of this it's possible that maybe she does try to work it out with Porn Chai. Maybe, and maybe she's being honest to be like, I can't promise anything. And maybe she is interested in pursuing it with him again. Maybe she'll invite him to Hawaii. There are a lot of maybes.
I thought she would invite him to Hawaii. That's how I expected it to happen. That not committing to doing anything, but hey, I've got to go, but come see me in Hawaii. We'll talk more. We'll get to know each other better. That's what I would have expected to happen. And I think I would have been more satisfied.
I agree with that. I feel like it's too much of a change in her character that she closes that door, especially when this has happened to her, instead of being like, look, a lot of things have changed and, but I have to leave but I want you to be, I want to pursue this further. So come visit me at your earliest convenience. Right. And maybe that would all happen.
Now disposable to her because she has money. It doesn't sit right.
Exactly. Right. Although, once again, I think like you said, they're putting the thumb on a scale to, and unfortunately, I totally agree that it's almost too much money to give her $5 million. You can imagine $1 million being like, oh, I can start this business. My son could be like the manager of the business. I can set him up. I can set myself up. I can keep doing what I like to do and still be like a part of the world. And like $5 million, she honestly could be like, do I want to spend $1 or $2 million opening this business? I could just live off this $5 million, right? Because like, what's the business going to generate? A few $1 million for me? I have a few $1 million. Why would I open a business, right? So it's, it's too much money. In the same way that Tanya having $500 million was way too much for her as well. So, okay. The morning comes.
Okay, wait, before you get to the morning.
Please.
I wish I had written down every time someone made a reference, hey, it's your last day.
Enjoy your last day.
The double meaning of, is it their last day?
Exactly.
So yes, now it's morning.
Yeah, enjoy your last day. I like that, how there's even like a pause sometimes, like, enjoy your last day. Whose last day is it? So yeah, the morning comes and a lot of things are happening here. The Hollingers have returned. They have already agreed earlier. There was this whole conversation with this completely underused head of staff crazy, baffling that they have this character in this show at all, practically. That he has coordinated with Valentine. Can you talk to Jacqueline that set up this photo op, the fortuitous, unfortunate photo op here? And the Hollanders have showed up. Guy Talk almost quits. He's like, he finds out, by the way, I totally forgot to bring this up earlier, but the whole conversation, I thought, once again, leaning into the duality of Guy Talk, where he's like, I'm going to put my foot down. I'm not going to be violent, but at least I am going to say, hey, I know who these guys are.
Right.
And even without violence, I can do some overall good. And then, of course, that gets muddied yet again because Valentine goes, these guys cannot work here. They don't have a visa. If I get implicated in this situation, I'm going to get deported. They're going to get deported. If we go back to Russia, it's like a death sentence for us. So now he's like, okay, I thought I was doing the non-violent thing, but if it leads to violent action, then can I really do this? And he's so torn by this, he really decides to tell his boss is that he wants to quit. And the boss goes, look, I like you. Don't be overly rash. Think about it. Come back to me tomorrow if you still feel this way. And of course, everything changes by tomorrow. Lachlan decides to, when his brother tells him that, don't be a baby. If you want a protein shake, make it yourself. Lachlan decides to make a protein shake. And of course, those seeds are still sitting at the bottom of that blender. He doesn't even rinse it out, but go ahead.
Just the practicality of that.
Yeah.
First of all, I know Tim has been high on lorazepam this entire time. I think he finally hit the bottom of the bottle right before they left. But if you are going to abort a plan to kill your family, you got to clean out the blender.
You got to clean up after yourself. Yeah.
And then Lachlan comes along. And I mean, listen, I'm pretty clueless in the kitchen myself. But if somebody made something with a dairy product in it and it has sat out overnight and supposedly that dairy product went bad, why would you not just a quick rinse? You don't have to soap it up. Just wash it out with some water.
I mean, they do in there. I agree with all of that, by the way. It's part of the thing that I bump up against the whole construct of that to start with. But they do a really good job of making this guy seem completely incompetent at what he's doing. Like he's like putting the protein powder in. He just adds some water, like right from the sink. It's just like he's like it's like as if he's never seen someone make a protein shake before.
I guess because everybody commented on how weird the pina colada smelled. I can only imagine what it smells like now that the coconut milk has sat out overnight. I mean, to then affirmatively, without his brother around, he's not looking for his brother's approval at this particular moment of like, I'm going to make my own protein shake and drink it in front of you. I mean, he just does this of his own. I don't know, man.
Yeah, this was all very contrived, to say the least. Although it pays off some pretty well.
It does.
The by the way, coconut milk is not dairy product. It's just comes from the coconut. They call it coconut milk, but it can.
But I still think it would spoil over.
Yes, I've had spoiled. I mean, I've opened we tried to make pina coladas and we opened the coconut milk container and it was just like solidified in there. It had gone bad.
Rancid, right? It can still get rancid. But yes, good point. I was equating milk with dairy. But
for anyone who's ever milked coconut before.
Yes. Always brings me back to Meet the Parents, and you can milk anything that has nipple.
Did you milk me?
But yes, we have nut milks, we have coconut milk, we have all sorts of milks. We're spoiled for choices of milk, and they are not all dairy products. So
the nipples on the almonds are especially difficult to get to.
And they can all go bad. I think they can all go bad.
Yes. Yeah, almond milk can go bad too, for sure. So, and I mentioned some of these things already. So Belinda does get the $5 million, gets wired into her account. Shocking to see that number, of course, on the screen. She already tells her son that she's talked to the bank. It's real. It's actually there. Greg talked to her. Oh, I by the way, going back to, once again, something I forgot to bring up, that I love when they, when the son is making that whole sales pitch to Greg / Gary, saying to him that, like, my mom's filled me in. And, if you make us happy, we are 100% on Team Gary, which I think is very apropos that he's like Team Gary. It's like Gary.
Yeah.
So like, I did love that. But Gary's spoken to her, and I would have loved to have seen that conversation. I'd love to see the tone of him saying this to her, that maybe he is having this moment of saying like, hey, I can do one good thing with her money, and other than just spending it here on these luxuries for himself. But who knows? It's hard. I guess leaving it ambiguous is probably better anyway.
I have questions about the tax consequences. I feel like she should have set up an offshore account for this, but not my problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that works. With just suddenly having $5 million in your account,
Right.
like you have to claim it. I guess they don't know you have it probably unless you are spending it, but then you have to explain. You got to launder it through your business. That's why she's going to open that business, so she can launder the $5 million. That's what's going to happen. You have one client a day and you make $150,000 a year. How does that happen? The Ratliffs go to breakfast. They do not notice that Lachlan is dying by poolside.
She just calls out, meet us bread.
Okay, you okay? But when he nearly dies, he does puke up most of so that's why he survives this. But there's a beautiful visualization. You said you wanted to touch on this, but what did you think about those moments where he's like looking at the sky and the palm tree, which of course is reflected again? We see multiple people die here.
Yeah.
Staring up at the sky, right? This image we see multiple times.
Maybe it's good the milk was rancid. Maybe that's really what made him puke rather
Could have been
the poison, now that I think about it. But no, I thought this was really well done. And I actually thought he was going to die.
I did too. I thought he was going to die, yes.
And
I thought like we were going to have a whole bunch of deaths. And I had joked.
Still did.
We did. I had joked in previously that it's like, we had one death in the first season, and then we had like 4 deaths last season. And I'm like, maybe we'll have 7 or 8 deaths, because we heard all the gunfire earlier on. And I'm like, I don't think we got to that number, but I'm like, maybe we will have more deaths every single year.
I wondered that too, actually. It's just escalating, doubling down. But yeah, I thought it was really beautifully done, his near-death visions. And I don't think we've seen enough to know, but I could see it giving him more purpose and meaning and drive going forward, where he's been, wandering around a little bit helpless up until now.
Yep.
I think this might be an experience that centers him.
Yep. I completely agree with all of that. And we don't see it. And maybe once again, Mike White wants to leave some of these things unexplored. Not that all these people will come back, but he has the opportunity if he wants to. A couple of years later, we catch up with some of the Ratliffs. Maybe 2 of them are on vacation together. Maybe Saxon's getting married, and we see him, with his and then we can explore who he was then versus who he was now, right? And those type of things. So I'm pretty sure that we're going to see Mike White is starting to develop these themes and characters that might cross over from one story to the other. And I love this. I thought it was beautifully done. And I do think that, having that type of an experience is not only transformative for him, but of course it's transformative for Tim. Tim, who's been so worried, and we'll get to this at the very, very end, been so worried about like, what is my family going to do? On the boat, he is talking about how like family is the most important thing. And I think that's an easy thing to say. He has said it multiple times over the course of the show. But I think now he really feels that, like having nearly lost a son, he's like, that is, this is the
hand. I mean, by his
right,
hand,
right, exactly. And that even this
the one who he was not going to kill.
Yeah, exactly. What an irony there, for sure. And I thought that that's part of the reason I was pretty confident he was going to die, because like that would be the biggest irony of all.
Really would.
What's next? Oh, Jim Hollinger turns out to be a bad dad to the very end. He can't give this guy a minute. I mean, I know he's embarrassed by what happened at the house, but this was pretty messed up. And, he insults his mom, and which is probably true. We had suspected that the mom's story wasn't all on the up and up. But of course, this puts Rick, who is just so, contemplate. He really looks like he's ready to turn the page. And then we see him have this, terrible breakdown. And then he goes and runs off. Chelsea follows up on him. If he had just been able to talk to his sagacious Indian woman, none of this would have happened.
If she had just made some time for him, this all could have been
just rearrange your schedule, lady. Just bump everybody an hour. But
yeah, I mean, Zion didn't particularly even want this.
Yeah, he didn't even want to go to the session. Exactly. Yeah.
So, I mean, he clearly seemed distressed. So I wish she had asked him a few questions just to judge his level of distress and to see whether, it was something serious. But in her defense, you probably don't see a lot of people in severe mental health crises at the White Lotus in Thailand.
Right.
So she's probably kind of like, yeah, whatever wealthy person problem you're having, we'll talk about it. But although she does know his background.
And the other thing I was going to say too is, on a more positive version of this, is that she might be thinking, well, I just have this 1 hour session, just hang in there. This isn't life and death. Like, she doesn't realize that. And it's like, yeah, like my afternoon's clear. We can talk for hours. I can, we can go somewhere if we get away from here, if you need to. So she may think like, oh, I'm going to carve out a whole afternoon to talk to him. She may just be very interested in him anyway, considering their relationship up until this point. But of course, it just doesn't go. Just a terrible turn of events.
Told him to sit inside instead of on the bench.
Exactly. So many what ifs. I mean, you think about like just so many things just go a little bit differently.
Yeah. Some sort of relaxation room in there where he could have a cup of green tea and, I
mean, if they hadn't decided to take the picture right there, right? Like they were like literally right in front of his face. Yeah. And of course, very importantly, I wanted to mention the fact that Jim Hollinger is strapped. He's brought a gun with him, which is another issue, right? He brings that gun to basically make sure he's protected in case Rick tries to make a move. And of course, that's being armed is exactly the thing that gets him killed.
Before we get there, just a moment of acknowledgement for the donut tree at breakfast and Chelsea's commitment to the donuts. I flags that. Because even when things get tense, she goes and takes that donut with her.
She needs the donut. Exactly. She can't pass up a donut. Who can pass up a fresh donut? I mean, come on.
But yes, this is so poorly handled by every single person involved.
Everybody involved has across the board, by the way. This is, I think, telling in a way that everything is bad, is that not making room for someone when they are obviously really, truly despondent. That's one decision that could have gone differently. Rick, of course, not changing, like sitting there and having this photo op happening in front of him, not just walking away, just trying to do anything else, incapable of doing that.
Property really should be.
Right. Yeah, just leave immediately. Just tell Chloe we're leaving right now. Jim bringing the gun. If Jim had not brought that gun, I mean, he has security guards there. If he didn't bring that gun, this wouldn't have happened. He would have gotten punched in the face probably, but he wouldn't have been shot. And then, of course, we'll get to the very end. But like the fact that Shrithala's response is kill them. Kill them. It's like
and Jim, first of all, saying what he did about Rick's mother.
Oh yeah, right.
To antagonize him further, and not share. He was willing to share with his wife that he's Rick's father.
Exactly.
But not giving any frame of reference, talking cryptically. Your father was no good anyway. I mean,
right.
At what point is the jig up and the charade is over?
Right.
I don't understand why he would choose that. I mean, you could say the awful words about the mom, but then like, why get into this thing about the dad if you're not going to end with, and I'm your father? Like, it just, then don't touch the subject of the dad. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, all of this is terrible, I think. And like you said, on the one hand, you can imagine Jim being like, this guy's obviously mentally deranged. Do I want him in my life? I don't know if he needs money. I don't want the complication. And obviously he didn't want the complication. Probably this is how he's lived his entire life. He's a selfish jerk. Fine. But you could imagine being like, I don't want this. If this is me personally, I'm putting myself into projecting into these characters. I'll have him sit down with me with the security guards there or outside the door or whatever, and just lay it all out there, because I don't want this guy coming back at me again. He tried to kill me before. I don't want this guy coming into my house or showing up at or cornering me somewhere on my property, and trying to kill me again. Right. So you brought a gun, thinking that this is not over yet. So like I just lay it all out there, but then be like, and I don't want, you say it to him, I don't want anything to do with you. I just don't want you coming back at me, but go ask her, go ask her family, go ask around. This is what's going on. And you need to grow up and get over this, right? Just to get him out of your hair, right? Not to, because you want to continue this relationship, you can end it there as well, right? I mean, he abandoned her for his whole entire life. He may not want to pursue it at all. So anyway, it's just horribly handled. And of course, it all goes awfully wrong. I suspected this, by the way. The one thing I was wrong about, it wasn't the monkeys who shot people. I was wrong about all my theories. But the one thing I was right about was the whole Darth Vader, he is your father. So that realization, of course, which I think many people were on board with this theory way back anyway. And of course, so the shooting happens. He goes behind that gong. Chelsea is nearby. He kills, at least he shoots those two security guards. Maybe he kills them for all I know.
Yeah, unclear to me, but I mean, he was a really good shot.
Yeah, very good shot, yeah.
I feel like he might have killed them.
Right. So he might know what he's doing there. But unfortunately, one of those ricochets kills Chelsea. And this is the other time I choked up. I did. Just Walter Goggins, like just that no. And just like he can't say anything else. And it's just so futile. It was really heartbreaking, yeah.
But a bit of humor when the hotel manager leaps into the water.
Yes, they did have a little bit of humor in there. Yeah, it's true. He just like falls off and then runs off in the water, holding his phone up so it doesn't get wet. But yeah, it was that was the one.
Yeah, and even in those moments, he couldn't say that he loved her.
I know. He just kept saying no. And he says, don't die. But just as like, we'll be, and then of course, we'll be together forever. And they are together forever. And then Gaitak, of course, gets, pressured by Sritala. And he's not a bad shot either. Not the first shot.
We knew that from the shooting range.
First shot, the shoulder. Second shot, kill shot.
But the whole thing about whether he has the killer instinct or not. Yeah. I don't think this was an instinct so much as it was following directions.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, shot a guy in the back who's carrying his dead girlfriend. I don't know.
In the back. This is not very Buddhist of him at all. Yeah. It's not like he was a threat at that moment. He's unarmed, carrying this girl who's probably dead already. But still, I mean, it's, not great. But my question to you, he falls into the water with Chelsea. He floats to the surface. And then we have Walter Goggins' face framed with the water. Beautiful the way they framed this perfectly. The shot from under the water, but of course him and staring up at the sky again. And that look of peace on his face, the same exact face we saw him make when he was sitting there at the, orgy, Frank's orgy. And it's like that same kind of beatific expression. And what do you think that says? I mean, we have the whole idea that pain is in being the individual is in a very, I guess you can read this in a cynical way or in a more optimistic way, that he's reached his peace at this moment in his death. But yeah, I mean, he's had a tortured life, right? So.
Yeah, that's what I felt it was. But, to go back to my questions about this philosophy is how much of that was of your own doing and of your own making. And don't we at some point choose whether to torture ourselves with things and whether to let them go? So I think for me personally, some deeper questions here, but I do think he was with Chelsea. They're together forever.
Yep.
He, in some ways, did what he came there to do in some ways. And so,
I mean, he does have closure on that relationship, right? So now he knows who his father was. And yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I have complicated feelings about the way this thing ends because there is some resolution to all of it. But, and of course, if you believe in Amor Fati, if you believe that this is the fate, all fated, then all these things, if they just did this differently, maybe there was no way this ended any other way.
Yeah, I think that is possible. I think, I have some broader thoughts. Would you prefer that I save them?
let's save them for the end because I want to talk about how the season is. Yeah,
Sure.
let's save that for the end because I think that there are more. There's a lot of thematic stuff to talk about here. So then we get to the very end, of course. Where does everybody end wrap up? The Ratliffs, they're receiving the news. They've gotten their phones, but Tim seems at peace. He's like, we're going to get through it. We're family.
The shot of the water,
The water droplets.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's something that brought an image that brought him peace before, and he smiles when he sees it, and he's like, "Yeah, life is pain, but you live through it, right? Amor Fati." And of course, on the soundtrack, very importantly, that psalm again, right? The rose that always blooms, right? So this is the yin and yang. This is the cycle of life. This is the rose that blooms after every winter. That there are the downtimes, but the rose will bloom again. And
I like that though. He's like, the family gets their phones back, and he's like, "There's going to be some news," and then he just locks the cards.
Exactly. I like the different interactions. Victoria is not on her phone, so she's just like kind of reading the kids' reactions. It looks like Piper maybe is just getting stuff in the headlines, but Saxon is probably getting like reading text directly. And Saxon just keeps looking at his dad because Saxon's probably like, oh, he's getting all of the details. Piper might have just gotten like a news alert that, that her dad's being investigated. And then Victoria's looking at them like, huh? It's like, oh, she's, I like that Mike White, by the way, in the featurette at the end. Maybe she's definitely a character we see again because he said like, she's not going to be happy with like not having enough, but he goes, but I have a feeling that she has a backup plan. So it's like, well, maybe we'll see what Victoria's backup plan is in her next season of the show or one of the next seasons of the show.
Yeah, she might have, speaking of offshore accounts, she might, I'm sure her family before marriage has a great estate planner or whatever that they work with. And, probably they might even have a prenup where she nailed down certain things. Who knows? But,
or she could remarry. Like there could be a lot of other.
There are a lot of options. Yeah. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. And I have a feeling of all the characters here, if I had to bet, and maybe we'll save that for the end. Who do you think we'll see again in other seasons? But I'll put my thumb on the scale right now. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Victoria.
Well, I would love to see her again. I think she actually overtook Chelsea as my favorite by the end.
Yeah, we have the psalm playing, that rose ever blooming. And it's playing under all of this, by the way. We see that Frank is back at the monastery. So he's off his bender and he's back to being, recommitting to sobriety. Exactly. Guy Tuck gets the girl and the promotion. This is the most cynical aspect of the show. It's like all he had to do is like kill. By the way, conveniently, the security guards are dead, so they need a new security guard. I mean, we don't know if they're dead. If they're not dead, then they're badly injured.
At least. Yeah. Yeah, all he had to do was completely change his belief system and self.
Exactly. Yeah. Just betray all your beliefs and you get everything you want. So that is the most cynical thing I think we see there for sure. Oh, one more thing to mention, of course, is that Greg is on his throne once again. And apparently that fantasy of his was legit. And Chloe's like, thumbs up. We got a new F-boy to take care of you for. And Greg even does a little wink. Greg's still living high and hog. So there you go. He gets everything he wants. But that's not by the way, this music, the psalm is playing under all of this. But what do you make of Belinda and Zion leaving on their private yacht to go to the airport as well, I'm sure. Porn Chai is very wistful on the beach, maybe hopeful. It doesn't seem too, I mean, how do you read his face?
I agree. He didn't seem devastated.
Yeah. I feel like he's like, well,
it's only been a week.
It's only been a week. Exactly. It's easy come, easy go. And who knows, maybe they continue this in the future. If I'm her, you at least invite him to Hawaii and try it out, right? See if there's something there.
I would think, but then again, she didn't mention it.
Yeah.
But also, there was just a mass shooting on this property. Why is nobody?
Everyone's pretty chill, right? Even the ladies, by the way. Even the ladies don't say anything on the boat, but they're all kind of just like laughing and hugging and like, kind of fall back. And they literally like were in the middle of the crossfire just moments before.
It seemed a little serious when she was like looking at the island as they were pulling away.
That's true.
And I don't know, like maybe somehow the Ratliff family didn't hear about what happened somehow. I don't know. But
It is possible they didn't hear about it, but I mean, how do you not hear
Like,
about that? You know,
I'm bringing my United States Western idea of what would happen, but you'd think they would like rope off the place and be like, okay, nobody's going anywhere. We have
right. You need to
several
investigate.
dead bodies. I mean,
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah. And some of these people have interacted, like, for example, Saxon interacted with Chelsea. So they might be like, we need to question you about.
we're in the middle of the murder scene.
Yeah, that's a very good point. They were literally moments. Yeah. So maybe they've been questioned. So maybe that's why. But by the way, maybe there's more people on this island than just these people. For all we know, these people were questioned and they are now departing here at the end. But that doesn't, I mean, not Belinda and Zion, of course, they're living. But yeah, it is.
Everyone's demeanor just seems like they are not very shaken up by this situation. I feel like I would be shaken up for a while.
You know what? Even to your point, not only the people who knew some of these people, even just tangentially interacted with them a little bit, would be more disturbed to find this out. It's just the fact that you think about how everybody, when Zion was trying to make his way to check on his mom in the very first episode, people are like hiding behind, like people are, all these people were like, oh my God, I was on my last day at the resort and all this gunfire broke out. You know, I'd be like, just that in and of itself would be traumatic, right? Much less if you knew the person who ended up dead, right? So that would be, yeah, so pretty crazy. Like you'd think Saxon would be like, oh my God, I was talking to her a few hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a little bit more just to wrap things up nicely and not because it doesn't really make sense. I totally agree. One more thing is that when Belinda and Zion right away, we don't hear the psalm on the soundtrack. We hear Billy Preston's "Nothing from me, it's nothing." So I'm like, what does that mean? I mean, I guess it's better to have something than have nothing. maybe that's all we get to know about that.
Yeah,
and that's what really things.
Choice, just stylistically, seeing it
very big kind of counterpoint.
What the season has been.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and then Mike White in the, just a couple of things he mentions. One was, or maybe the biggest one is teasing what's going to happen next season. He says he wants to get away from crashing waves and seaside resorts. So if you had to take a wild guess, where would you, maybe not a wild guess as what he's actually intending, if not a seaside resort, what type of location would you like to see?
I feel like, I'm not sure if you and I have had this conversation, but I've had it with many people. Are you a beach person or a mountain person? It feels like it's generally one or the other. So my first instinct is if you're not on the beach, you're going to be in the mountains. So maybe the Swiss Alps or something like that.
A ski resort? I was thinking a ski resort, and I did like that ski episode of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, for example. But I don't know if I would want to see a whole season up in, like in a snowy, it might be too limited. What we get to see might be a little too limited. I'm going to Iceland or something though, and go to one of those resorts just to see all the kind of beautiful, different types of landscape they have out there.
Could be maybe in Morocco or something, in one of the old cities there.
Perhaps.
Like they have some amazing resorts in those areas.
They're pretty close to the water too, though. Maybe so we might end up
on the water.
They're not on the water, correct?
I don't think.
Well, it depends, right? Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious. I'm very curious. I have a feeling for some reason. I just think it's going to be ski based, and I don't know if I want to see all that white for a whole season of the show, but we'll see. There's plenty of places to choose from. I'm sure they are scouting places, and I'm sure that given how these locations become tourist attractions with the success of the show, that I'm sure people are angling to be the next place.
I think they're all 4 seasons, right? Is that true?
I don't know, to be honest. Is that a 4 seasons behind you? This is actually the location, by the way. I was looking for pictures of locations to put as our backdrops. And that one is where they shot one of the locations. I think they shot in multiple spas to make it one. That this is one of the locations behind Sona. All right, so those final thoughts you had. What did you think about the season? How do you think this episode pays off the season? Yeah, go ahead.
First, one thing that is a little nitpick that we've talked about before. How do you feel in the end about this whole closed captioning situation? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
To see that lettering. But what was the point of it?
I don't know. I think
Captioning in the language that they're talking?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a different dialect because I've seen
Are you
other
thinking it's a
Indonesian
different
film.
dialect?
I'm not sure. I honestly didn't do the research to understand what this is. But if you watch, like I've seen some Indonesian action films, which have become big in the past few years, like The Raid, which I talked about in a recent podcast episode. And they have dual subtitles on the screen at the same time. And I don't know if it's because they have dialect. I don't know if it's because in my head, for some reason, I'm like, maybe there's a Chinese audience for Indonesian films. So they have, I honestly don't know, but I think that, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just think that might be an explanation. I think it's stylizing what occurs in Indonesian films. Yeah.
If it's a different dialect or language than they're speaking, then I'm totally fine with it.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty no matter what. If it is literally captioning of what they're speaking, I feel like it's pretentious and I didn't need.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, deeper themes. I just felt like, speaking of, how things are escalating and doubling down, I kind of want to go back and revisit the previous seasons just because I feel like this was darker than the previous two seasons. And that's when I said I'm still processing. I'm not sure how I feel about that because the tone of it felt very similar to me up until this last episode. Mm-hmm. And then this last episode to me was so dark in the body count and in the way everything happened. I've mentioned several times in the previous seasons, the deaths. I don't want to use the word whimsical because we should never use the word whimsical when it comes to death.
Right.
But, like the Tanya last season, her last thing was, "You've got this," and then right into the water. Right? I mean, it's a little bit played.
Slapstick, at least. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I had thought that was a precedent that had been set for how these things happen. I do think the sequence of events was a misunderstanding. So there is something that is like similar-ish, but it's such a dark misunderstanding. Yeah. The consequences are so dark. It didn't have like the other seasons had a zany kind of feel in the last episode leading up to the death. Whereas here, just everything turned so dark. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. What are your thoughts?
I liked it. I do agree. This is darker and, just the action, just like a shootout. So you didn't expect to see a shootout. I mean, we have a shootout in the end of season 2. But it is slapstick, right? Totally slapstick shootout. So it is a very different in tone. And maybe the show has become less of a comedy over time. Maybe this is all intentional in the fact that Mike White talked about how season 1 thematically, his primary theme that he was thinking about when he wrote those scripts was privilege or power as well, just the power dynamics, even between the staff and these privileged people, even within the staff, like, the way the head of staff is sexually harassing one of his workers who might be enjoying himself, but still there is a power dynamic that's playing out there. So that's a theme in the first season. With the second season, it was very much about the power dynamics of sex. So it's not about money. It's not about having control over somebody. It is about the sexual dynamics and how there is power plays within that as well. So that was his primary concern there, which once again opens itself up to like a sex farce, that type of theme. In this season, he was much more interested in these existential thoughts of like, how do you give meaning to your life and how do you cope with death? So I think the fact that the theme is about coping with death, inevitably it's going to be a darker theme. So to your point, I'm not sure if I didn't prefer this season to season 2, my general opinion of it. But I think maybe that darker tone, rather than being like, this is a shift in the show, maybe it's like, well, we're talking about death here. Maybe the next show will be zanier because the themes that'll be explored there will be more lighthearted, let's say, right? So I think it all depends on how that season goes. But of course, they all will have a murder. Now that's definitely going to be thematically what links these seasons together.
No, I take your point, but I think for me also what I struggled with is that to me, this episode felt so much darker than the other episodes of this season.
Very season, right? Of show, right?
And so I wasn't prepared. And I think that's why I'm still processing it, is I wasn't prepared for it. And so I haven't decided yet whether I liked it or not, because I was taken off guard by it. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I didn't think it was going to be so grim.
You know what? I would recommend you rewatch the show in the fact that, especially the first, just the 3 episodes or so, I don't feel that this was something that, I mean, there were moments, even in the last episode, where it feels like Alexei, I forget the Russian guy's name, the other Russian guy, that things look like right before it gets slapstick again, the girlfriend shows up, it looks like things might potentially get threatening. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So there's little moments of darkness. There were people who were speculating that Lori wasn't going to make it back to the hotel because she's out in the middle of the street trying to hail a cab. So there was some feelings, but so recently there's been a little bit of it, but not a lot of it. And the reason I mention that is go back and check out episodes 1 and 2. There are the nights in every night of the show. There are moments where you feel the camera like roving through the empty corridors or the hallways. Yeah. There are these shots where you see the resort that are from the middle of the ocean, and you just hear the sound of the ocean crowd crashing, and they're very ominous. And I feel like that almost feels like something out of a horror movie, like in a horror movie that would obviously be the lead up to the serial killer showing up or whatever. But the fact that they've introduced those scenes earlier on in the season, I think there was always this creeping death theme in the visuals of the show. But to your point, I think like probably mid-season, they stopped doing a lot of that. Although, death became more to the fore. It felt like someone was going to die. At least for the last 3 or 4 episodes, it has felt like someone might die in any one of those episodes. So, but yeah, I overall don't know if this would be it's definitely not my favorite season, I would say.
Yeah, I think also, to me, together with that darkness, supporting that darkness, in my mind, Guy Talk betraying his value system.
Mm-hmm.
What I saw is Belinda's character taking a negative turn as well. So I felt like just there was a lot of negative turns in addition to the actual death and the grimness around that left me overall with dark feelings.
Yeah, there's more. Well, I mean, I would say that I'm not sure if this is more cynical than his other seasons.
I want to go back and compare where the characters ended out in season 2, and season 1, because maybe it's the same and it's just hitting me different for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how Greg gets away with it here after they make a big deal about him getting some kind of comeuppance. You think about Guy Talk reversing himself on his belief system to get the girl in the end. So that does feel cynical. Yes, right. You think about Rick and Chelsea being like even in this episode, having that beautiful, reunion on the beach, just to end up dead by the end of the episode. Yeah. So there is some darkness here, definitely more so in this particular episode, as opposed to, all the bad guys at the end of season 2, all dying in comical ways. And of course, Tanya that's the final twist, still dies. But that is all feels way more lighthearted. But I do wonder, anyway, so I do feel what you're describing. But I think that the cynicism is probably there in all the seasons to different extents, maybe more so here than ever before. You might be right. Yeah, so the season overall, the big breakout moments, if you can think of any other ones, obviously Frank's monologue. That's the first time that things went really viral for that show. I mean, that video has been uploaded to YouTube many, many times. Lachlan giving his brother a lending hand, lending his brother too willing to lend his brother a hand, let's say. That, of course, was like a ratings breakthrough for the show. People are into this storyline for some reason. And I think here in the finale, the whole like Rick and Chelsea's fate is Amor Fati is going to be like another one of those moments that the show will be remembered for. Anything else you think about? I guess the girls that I think a highlight for me, the girls going clubbing that night was a lot of fun just to see them cut loose and reconnect with those younger versions of themselves. Anything else?
Gunfight too. I feel like
Yes.
will be a memory for them when they talk about the trip. And remember when we were in that crazy water gun fight and we had to hide in the storm?
Kids all attacked us.
So yeah, I love that. And I love the bottomless lower as a pound bottle.
Yes.
Thank God she refilled it right before, I guess, for Tim's sake. I've said it 1,000 times. I love everything about Parker Posey's character. I could just watch her for days.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that is kind of viral here, especially I think as people catch up on the show over time and appreciate it more, is, just in this particular episode, her like creeping enthusiasm that like kind of like she could barely contain herself. She's like wants to jump out of her seat when she's just like, ooh, let's go shopping. She's so excited. She's just like, oh, I'm going to take her. I'm going to buy you anything you want because you have, you turned out to be exactly who I thought you were. Oh, thank God.
Her plan worked perfectly.
Perfectly. I know. Yeah, that gloating, which I say like such an ugly character trait, but so perfectly conveyed by her for sure. Last question I have for you, maybe a big one. So what is this all about? What was this show about? What was this season about? What is Mike White trying to say about the human condition across this whole entire project? I think he's trying to say a lot of stuff here. What are your general feelings?
Wow, what a deep question, and one that it being, less than 24 hours since I watched the finale, I had too much time to actually contemplate it on that deeper level. But I mean, certainly we were given many messages about Buddhist values and philosophies and ways of thinking about suffering in the human condition and what causes it, and that we are bringing it upon ourselves largely by being concerned with the wrong things. So I think that's the underlying message, but I need to think about the application of that to the characters here. That's what I haven't really given thought to. What are your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that's primarily what he's trying to get at is that, he was not, but he has talked about being very depressed at one point in his life. He moved to Hawaii as part of dealing with his depression. And of course, in the midst of that, started writing this show, or within a year or two of that. He was already a very successful screenwriter, by the way, but now, of course, is a megastar and everybody in Hollywood wants to work with him. So he's had this incredible privilege. He's like Jacqueline here, getting this like late career superstardom as a creator. So he has more success than he's ever had before, but was already successful to a large extent. Very few writers get to make blockbuster movies and indie movies and direct and,
and go on Survivor.
Yeah. Was he on Survivor? I know he was on Big Brother with his dad. Not Big Brother, The Amazing Race with his father.
Oh, shoot. Maybe I'm mixing them up.
Yeah. But he might have been on Survivor too. I'm not up on Survivor anymore. He may he loves those shows, so he might have well gotten I can imagine them cross casting. So he's done a lot of work. Started off on Freaks and Geeks as an actor. And
one of my all-time favorites.
As an incredible career since then. But he maybe like Laurie had a lot, but didn't know how to frame his life. And I think he's trying to work these things out in coming to terms with the fact that life has good things, life has bad things, and how do you reconcile those things? And I think that's what is rich about the show, is the idea that we all have to deal with this, right? We are all like the Sisyphus rolling that rock up the mountain every day just to do it again the next day. And how do you, come to terms with that? And they're different. And I think this is openly trying to explore that specifically through these Eastern philosophies. But yeah, I mean, I think that's where I don't like this show, especially season 1, when it is at its most cynical, because I think what works the best in his writing, even in his movies, is when he isn't being overly judgmental, as in the fact that like these are complicated things and whatever gets you through the night, to quote John Lennon, it's all right. It's just like we all have to cope with things different ways, and there is no right and wrong answer. So I think every single time he is overly cynical in his perspective on characters, that's when I bump against the show. But when you see like the three women together, that's where I resonate with the show, where you see them kind of coming to terms that like we are all dealing with life differently. We are all these different aspects on this continuum, but we're just here for each other. That's it. We're just here to experience it. And I think that is kind of a beautiful idea. And it's probably the best we can do as people.
I agree. That is a beautiful idea. And one that I think as people approach middle age, generally
yes, things that are on my mind all the time. Now,
embrace that. Yes, or approach middle age. We're solidly in.
We are in middle age for sure.
But yes, I agree with you. Like if I compare this to season 1, as you know, I feel like season 1 was much more one-dimensional.
Yeah,
actually, I do like here that the characters are generally more three-dimensional and more full as people, which is, much more like reality. I think every now and then I meet a person who is very one-dimensional, but it generally the exception to the rule, especially as you get older, people have life experiences, life happens to them. It forces you to develop those other aspects. So I liked here, even though I do think there were things that were very cynical.
Yeah.
Even then, Guy Talk, I think we saw a lot of the conflict he was having and the reasons he made the decisions he did. Parker Posey, Victoria, she reflects on, I have thought about it and I am not meant to live an uncomfortable life, right? She's not taking it for granted. She's thought about it. She is in fear of living in poverty.
She's accepted it.
Survive. She doesn't think like, oh, this is just what life is. Aren't I lucky? Even though she kind of does say that to Piper, but she's considered what the alternatives are, and she has.
It's not for her.
Yeah, it's not for her. And she has the luxury of making that decision.
Exactly.
So I think these characters are more well drawn than they had been originally in the first season. And I think even where there is cynicism, at least we have other inputs as to what's going on into in the character's mind and in their life that make it seem a little bit more interesting. Then, whereas in the first season, I felt like it was kind of a theme of rich people are annoying.
Exactly. Don't they suck?
Yeah.
From a rich person who probably hates himself at some level, right? I mean, no joke. I think that's part of what motivates him to write that. He probably is looking at himself with all this wealth and being like, I'm kind of a jerk.
No, I mean, I will say, and you and I have discussed this, although not in connection with season 3. In season 1, the Jake Lacey character, right? Complaining about how he didn't get the right room and they paid for a better room than they have, even though they have this spectacular room. I took his side in that. Yes, he is being annoying and obnoxious, and he has a perfectly amazing room. At the same time, he paid for that room, like he's annoying, but he's right.
Well, that's the thing I would say that my favorite thing about Mike White's writing is that even when that he's taking a side, he doesn't make Victoria a one-dimensional monster. Same thing with Jake Lacey, right? Where on the one hand, the fact that if we've been in that circumstance, of course we want the thing that we asked for. But then of course, on the other hand, where it's just like, you're on your honeymoon and you are not appreciating this at all. So at some point you have to like actually appreciate this absolutely stunning woman that you're next to you. And he's just like, he cannot get past the room. Can't.
Because they're lying too, right? That
yes.
They're saying, no, you do have the best room in the hotel. Right. And no, there's another one out there. Oh, yeah. I mean, it was kind of for me wondering, what does it say about me that I sympathize with his character? Because he was drawn to be clearly, I was supposed to find it very annoying and stupid, But
no, I don't think so. I think that I think that he wants to make people, and I think this is why the show is popular. He wants people to argue about like, well, I take this person's side, I take that person's side, right? I think like when you see it, I think he's gotten better at it when you think about the Jacqueline, Kate, and Lori dynamic. I think he wants people to be like, have a conversation where friends will sit down and go like, well, Lori was obviously right. Well, Jacqueline was obviously right. And he wants that. And this is why the show is popular, I think, too.
I think you're right about that, but I don't think that really happened with the Jake Lacey character.
No, I think it
resoundingly thought he was just the biggest jerk.
Yes. I mean, and that's what's funny about it. I think he has a rationale, but Jake Lacey, who is a really fun actor, by the way, but in that role, obviously, Mike White is not only writing these scripts, he's directing these scripts. So he is making him be a total douchebag.
Yes.
Every moment on that show. So he obviously is putting his thumb on the scale. And I think that's why the season one feels so cynical to me. Like you said, everybody was really just playing one note. There was limited shading of those characters. And once again, I think he's just gotten much better at this.
I agree.
And for me, of course, I've said this 100 times on this coverage, but season 2 for me is still my favorite. Also because part of it is because the themes there, this kind of like sexual competition and, questioning some of your more, less consequential decisions in your life, like not life and death all the time. It allows it to be more fun because none of this is really life and death. And then, of course, this season is all about life and death. It's much heavier stuff. And so season 2 is more fun and also much more easy to relate to because, of course, we all have existential dread, but it's not what we think about all the time. Like we're not contemplating murdering our families, hopefully not, on a regular basis, as opposed to, judging yourself against, am I successful as my friend? Am I not ambitious enough? Those type of things are things we ask ourselves every single day, of course.
Feels more down to earth and practical, more relatable to everyday life than these existential things.
Exactly. Yeah. And, but I think this is a really, I can nitpick that this is not season 2, but this is obviously one of the most well-constructed, written, performed shows we're going to see all year long. If we get like whatever, if The Last of Us is as good as this, we'll be so lucky, and it's not going to, right? So it's like no HBO show is probably going to be as good as this show this year, and most other shows are not going to be. And like I said, if this is like the baseline quality for the shows we watch week to week, that would be phenomenal. So I can complain it's not as good as season 2, which I think it's not. And it's maybe overly thematically ambitious and then still a little light in what it's trying to say about these huge themes. I can make all those complaints. It's still one of the best things we're going to see all year. As simple as that. So.
And still, in the end, I couldn't wait to watch the finale.
Absolutely.
So something.
I'm sure all of America, I haven't seen the ratings yet. They'll probably announce them later today. But I'm sure that whatever the record was last week, they broke it by a lot to last night. So, so we will see another season of this. I'm sure. I think that probably less than a year and a half away. And by the way, we're just like knocking them down. Shows that we've covered on the show that are popular that we're probably going to see sooner rather than later. They're already working on another season of The Day of the Jackal. They're already shooting another season of Paradise after the huge success of that. They're saying that Severance is going to come back in less than a year. This show, Mike White is saying it's only going to be a year or so before we see that. Next year could be a cornucopia of
we'll be talking to each other all the time.
Constantly. Oh, and of course, Your Friends and Neighbors got automatic green light for season 2. So season 1's coming out. Yeah, they automatically greenlit it because they were apparently so happy with season 1 that Apple immediately greenlit it. So they're starting production soon. So it's possible that we'll see this season of Your Friends and Your Friends and Neighbors. I keep saying that. Starting this week. And it could be like in less than a year, we'll have another season of that show. So
interesting. Anyway,
a bunch of exciting titles coming up. So here, and of course, here on the podcast, we will be talking about Mobland. Kind of a mixed reaction, I feel, other than Tom Hardy, which I really liked in that first episode. Still have not watched the second episode. I was watching The White Lotus, so I'm still behind on that one. But I'll be watching that today, and then I'll be recording with Darren, and we'll talk about that show. And of course, Friday, we'll be talking about Your Friends and Neighbors on Apple TV. Got it right that time. So check that one out. Get ready for it. Thursday night is when it premieres, and we'll be discussing it on Friday. And yeah, stay tuned for all of that. Watch this on YouTube. I guess I should put that at the top of the episode. But if you've made it this far, you probably don't want to hear the whole conversation again. But it is available on YouTube. If you know somebody who prefers YouTube, send them the link. We'll include it in the show notes. And yeah, a lot of exciting stuff coming. And I was pretty satisfied with this ending, I got to say. This episode.
I agree. I think it was a great episode. I'm just still processing the darkness of it and
Sure.
how I feel about that for the show. But you make some good points. And overall, I'm happy I watched it. So
you said you were so anticipating the finale. How did you feel like at the end of it? Did you feel like,
felt like, wow, that was a journey.
Good. That's good. I mean, like, either whether you say like it's better than last season or whatever, I mean, in fact that, I felt the same way. I felt like I didn't feel unsatisfied by the finale. I felt very satisfied by it, even if it wasn't really necessarily what I wanted to happen. Didn't want Chelsea and Rick to end up dead, that's for sure. But I was satisfied with the episode itself.
I felt like it was a journey, and I felt like the darkness of it was sitting with me in a way that I wasn't prepared for.
Yeah. I agree with all that. Oh, and by the way, one more thing to mention about the podcast. Yes, we'll be talking about Mobland later this week, but Darren messaged me separately and said that he's been dying to talk about the White Lotus all year long, and that for him, this is the best thing he's watched all season long. And he has so many things to say about it. So I promised him, I'm like, all right, me and Sona are going to do the full breakdown in our episode. You can just say all the stuff you've not been saying all season long. He's going to have a free carte blanche to just say everything he's been wanting to say. So apparently he's got a lot of things to say. So we'll be talking about that and Mobland. I have a feeling that that episode's probably going to be like 75% the White Lotus finale, 25% Mobland. But we're only at the beginning of that Mobland season, so probably not as much to say there anyway. But yeah, we'll be definitely talking about the White Lotus yet again later this week. And some of the things that I was a little unclear on, like Walter Goggins' experience, that led to this, partially led to this performance. I'm very curious about that. So I'll be doing my own research and maybe have some follow-up conversations in that episode. All right, so thank you. Oh, by the way, everybody, challenge, remember, recommend this to your friends and family and neighbors. And we'll be back again on Friday, Sona and myself, talking about that new season, that new series as well.
Sounds good.
Thank you again, Sona, for the conversation.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.